Hey everyone, I'm Matt Wedge, news editor at Daily Grindhouse. And if you've read anything I've written about film in the last 10 years, you know how excited I am to be sitting next to this gentleman here, the legendary Larry Cohen. And yeah, he is. He is. I know it's hard.
I get a thrill to find out it's me.
Yeah, he's a subtle guy. It's hard to notice him around. And I'm also here with Steve Mitchel, director of King Cohen, the documentary about Larry's career. And it's first of all a great film. We really enjoyed it. It was a blast. What drew you to Larry as a subject?
I was a fan. I was a fan of Larry's, and eventually I wanted to make my own documentary about somebody, and I was aware of Larry's work, and I was not as aware of as much of Larry's work as I thought I was, and I just said, this guy has a hell of a career. Might be worth making a movie about.
Yeah, I mean, when you dig into his backlog of scripts and things that he's written, it's amazing, especially when you get into the television stuff.
Oh, yeah, well, all the TV stuff I didn't know about. I knew about a lot of his early stuff. I knew about the features, and then there was all this stuff from the 70s and the 80s, and I think the thing that impressed me the most is how Larry shuttled back and forth between, mainstream and independent cinema. And nobody else has done that as far as I know. So I said, yeah, maybe this is worth making a movie about. And it was.
Not exactly. John Cassavetes did major films and also did his independent films. I don't know if he wrote them all, but he did gravitate back and forth. And he did a little television. He had a TV series, Johnny Staccato, which I'm sure he did just to get some money so he could go and make his pictures. But that was on for a season or a part of a season. So he's all right. He did that. There aren't too many of us, though. I'll say that.
That's only one, though. Yeah. That's only one that comes to mind. And he was primarily an actor. He acted in many cases to direct. So I'm trying to say how unique you are, Larry.
I'm trying to be fair. I mean, there may be one other person, and then that's it. Other than Cassavetes, I'm the greatest person that ever worked in the motion picture industry.
That's why we made the movie.
And I probably agree. So was there any point during the filming of the documentary where you started to think, usually they make these documentaries about guys like me after our careers are done. Was there ever a point where you were like, hey, I'm still writing? Let's not turn this into an epitaph.
Well, I never think about that kind of thing because I am writing all the time. So it never dawns on me that a time would come when I wouldn't be writing, because it's one of my favorite things to do. Even if I didn't get paid, I would be doing it. It's like painting. If somebody wants to paint, even if nobody bought the paintings, they would still do it. Mr. Van Gogh never sold a painting, but he just kept doing it. And he didn't realize, and nobody does, that Van Gogh was one of the wealthiest men in the world. His house was full of Van Goghs. Can you imagine how much that guy was really worth? Can you imagine the billions of dollars he was worth? And he didn't even know it. Where do they find all the scripts that I've written that have never been produced, that are sitting there waiting to be found? And they're all over the place. I mean, I'm writing an article now about all the scripts that I sold to major studios that were never produced, because these studios don't know what's in the vault down the basement. The management changes so many times, and nobody knows that 20 years ago, a great Larry Cohen script was purchased and never made. Sometimes because the administration changed. The people who ordered the material were no longer there anymore, and the new bunch don't want to read anything that somebody else commissioned. So it goes down into the vault. Now, if the studios would pay somebody to go down there and read those scripts and give them synopses, there's some really fantastic material around. Compared to what's being done today, the junk that they're putting out in the movie theaters today, sequels and remakes and spin-offs and nothing original. When you go in to tell a story to somebody at a studio, the first thing they say is, what is it like? And I say, it's not like anything. If it was like something, I wouldn't have written it. It's different. It's new. Oh, they say. And you see terror in their eyes, because if it hasn't been made before, how do they know it's any good? So That's why you get all this stuff being done that is a rehash of everything that's been done before. And usually they're not as good as the originals. They're bigger, but they're not as good.
Is there a script that you've sold that you wish you'd held on to direct? Like, is there a specific one or several?
Oh, there's many scripts that I wrote that I would like to have directed. But, I took their money. I'm honest about that. I sold the script, and it belongs to them. And, it's very hard to buy these things back, even though we're allowed to do it under certain regulations with the Writers Guild. But when you want to buy it back, if it's 10 years, they want interest for the 10 years on the original money. So now it's double what they paid you. And it's pretty prohibitive. Yeah. So it's, unless you can get a producer to come along with you and put up the dough. But I don't give up on this. I think there's a lot of stuff there that what I'm going to do is write up all the scripts that I've got and send it to all the new executives at the studios and see if I can provoke somebody into sending somebody down into the basement and get these scripts up.
You work with the same actors a lot, and one of the guys that have been in many of your films, and I can't find anything about him before or after you stopped directing, is James Dixon. Where did that guy come along? Because he's got a great face. He fits in perfectly in your films, and he just seems like this enigma.
I met James Dixon when we were both in the Army at Fort Dix, New Jersey, in basic training, and he was in the same unit as me, and he tormented the life out of me. He was awful. I mean, if we go on a 15-mile hike, he managed to get behind me on the road, and slowly but surely he would reach out and unbuckle all the stuff on my backpack, so that suddenly everything would fall off in the middle of the road. All the mess kits and all the other stuff, the tent, everything I had would just fall off. I'm gonna look around, there's Dixie. Oh my God, you did it again. and then he found out I was a writer. And we were washing out garbage cans at the KP duty, and it suddenly came up that I was a writer, and that Jimmy had worked for the Authors League in New York, which was the union that handles Broadway playwrights. And he'd met a lot of the famous playwrights personally over the years. Great writers like Robert E. Sherwood and maybe even F. Scott Fitzgerald. So suddenly we had a lot to talk about, and we became friends. And then after we got out of the service, we kept seeing each other. And I was only writing in those days. And then when I started making my films, he was a good friend, and I needed somebody I could trust. And I asked him if he wanted to be in the movies and come to New York and help me out on, his first one was Black Caesar. We dressed him up as a cop, and there he was stopping traffic in front of what is now known as Trump Tower. Try to get away with that today.
I think if anyone could do it, you could. But
all right, I'll try.
One of the films that you spent a little more time on in your documentary was special effects, and I was really happy to see that because I feel like that's sort of the ultimate early 80s New York movie where it's still how, people who grew up in the 80s think of New York as a scary, gritty place. And what do you feel, Larry, like, do you feel like you could actually still shoot in New York now with how homogenized it's become? And you talked a lot about the stricter police presence now.
Well, you certainly couldn't do what I did before because you would probably find yourself in prison. So I don't want to, even if you could get yourself out of the jam, you'd have to have lawyers' fees that would be really prohibitive. And I don't want to end up spending all my time arguing cases with the city and paying top dollars to lawyers. So it's better not to try and do that anymore. But I sure had a lot of fun doing it. And the actors had a lot of fun doing it too, because they had never seen anything like this. When I did the picture in Washington, D.C., and I had 3 or 4 Academy Award-winning actors there in the limousine. They say, "What are we shooting today?" And I said, "I'll let you know." And we drive up to something like J. Edgar Hoover's house and knock on the door, and the little maid would open the door. "Yes?" I said, "We're here to shoot the movie." In J. Edgar Hoover's house, the head of the FBI, oh God. And then she'd see the actors and recognize them and say, oh, come on in. And then we'd shoot the scene there, never having any permission. And the actors would be more flabbergasted than the maid that we're getting away with this, you know. And then they'd get right into it. Oh, they would be energized by this whole thing. That of all the movies they'd made, and some of them had made 30 and 40 and 50 movies, here they were with this crazy Larry Cohen, and we were doing things nobody else had done before. When we were in the Justice Department building, which we managed to get into over the weekend, we were supposed to shoot in the courtyard. Next thing you know, we were in the hallways, and then we were in J. Edgar Hoover's office, and then finally we ended up in the office of the Attorney General of the United States shooting a scene. And when the Attorney General, the #1 law officer in the country, returned the following Monday and found out a movie had been shot in his office, he went through the roof. He sent us a letter saying, you can't use any of that footage. And then he sent us another letter saying, I changed my mind, you can use the footage. We got the second letter first, so that was fine. I don't know what made him change his mind. I guess word got around that we were making a pretty good movie about J. Edgar Hoover, and we were being fair, and that they all wanted to see the picture. And everybody over there was curious to see the film and what we were doing.
Or he was a big Broderick Crawford fan. Who knows?
When we were shooting the first time, an agent came down and started asking us about the film. That was Mark Felt, who was one of the top agents at the Bureau, and who later became Deep Throat. And he became acting director of the Bureau after Hoover died. And we were chatting with him about the movie, and, you know, he thought Broderick Crawford was a pretty good choice. And, you know, there you are. I mean, we were just fooling around with the highest echelons of government and getting away with it. And then we closed down Michigan Avenue. Can you try to do that today? Try to close down the street between the White House and the Capitol building without anybody's permission, you know. But the cops went by, and we waved to them, and they waved back, and everybody was smiling, and nobody stopped us because they didn't think anybody would have the audacity to do that without permission. Who would do such a thing? Me.
Steve, you come from a writing background like Larry did, and I noticed you actually worked a couple of times with Jim Wynorski, who is I don't know if we can call him a favorite of the Daily Grindhouse crowd, but he's definitely infamous. Sure. He's kind of known as Wild Man. How was it working with him?
Well, God, I knew Jim from Fan Days back in New York, and Jim is a wild man in his own way. But yeah, we had a lot. We liked a lot of the same stuff. We had a lot of the same influences, and when we wrote Chopping Mall together, you know, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We just said, well, what do we want to see when we make a movie like that? And the movie is sort of the result of that kind of childish or childlike inspiration. You know, we wanted to run around the mall, shoot guns. You know, so it was. He and I are very much alike, although he's a lot nuttier than I am, I think, on the set. He is a little bit of a wild man, and he's always in a hurry. Okay. Yeah, that's why he's done so many movies, and that's why he's done so many low-budget movies, because he works very fast. Kind of like this guy over here.
How dare you call me low budget?
No, I was comparing how fast you guys were.
How about no budget?
More like no permission.
If I could eliminate the crew, I would do it too, you know. But fortunately, we used to have maybe 7 people on the crew, and that was pretty good compared to one picture I did, which was not one of my productions. I had 101 people on the crew, and we couldn't get but 15 of them into the set. So there was about 85 people standing in the street all day. And I said, why don't we send these people over to the location we're shooting tomorrow, and they can cable in and then hang the lights and get us all prepared. So tomorrow when we go over there, we can start shooting immediately. Oh, we don't do things that way, they said. That's always the answer. We don't do things that way. Why not? Well, there's no answer why not. It's just that we don't do things that way. And that's why movies cost so much money to make, and they go over budget all the time, because they don't do things that way.
It's never explicitly stated in your film, Steve, that you're retired from directing, but it's implied at times. Is this true, or are you just happy? You're fine just writing and selling scripts, or How do you feel that way?
No, I'm happy to direct under my own terms, but I have to have complete control of the project. And if I can't get that, there's no sense doing it. But I've got a number of projects too with J.J. Abrams with his company Bad Robot, and I expect to direct a couple of those. So we'll see what happens in the near future. It's very imminent, and I'll be happy to do it. I don't find directing to be much of a chore. I kind of enjoy it because I like actors. I have a lot of fun with them. So it's not a big deal, and I just go in and do it. And I don't do a lot of preparation. Everything seems to fall into place for me. I just go there to the location, and I always find something interesting to use as a device. And the actors are always full of anticipation on what's going to happen next. You know, what I really like is when I see an actor on the set who hasn't been called that day, but has just come in. I say, "What are you doing here today? You're not working today." "Oh, I just wanted to see what was going on." You know, they're so interested in the process that they show up when they don't have to. And they're not there for the money. They're there because they're enjoying the experience. And I'm enjoying their enjoyment of it. I enjoy their having a good time.
There's a lot of talk in the film about how much you love older movie stars, Betty Davis and Broderick Crawford you brought in, and pretty much the entire cast of the J. Edgar movie. But you also work obviously a lot with Michael Moriarty, but he falls into a long line of kind of character actors that you gave leading roles, like Tony LoBianco or John Ryan. Was there something? Do you go? Was it more just on their performances that you would cast them in lead roles, or was it just convenience, or what was the trick there?
No, Tony LoBianco was in a play that I did in 1970 off-Broadway called Nature of the Crime, and he played the lead and got wonderful reviews. And I'd seen him in The Honeymoon Killers before that. So when we were making God Told Me To, I offered him the part, and he jumped right in and did it. So we had worked together before and enjoyed each other. And with John Ryan, we went to City College together in New York. And I knew him from that, and I saw him on Broadway with Irene Papas in Medea. He played the husband whose children Medea kills. And I went backstage to see him and gave him the script for It's Alive, and he jumped aboard, and we were making a picture. So there's a lot of reasons why you pick certain actors, but sometimes I have had a peripheral relationship with them, or met them in passing, or with Michael Moriarty, we were just sitting in a restaurant and I saw him, and I remembered that he'd won the Tony Award for Best Actor and the Emmy Award several times and the Golden Globe Award several times. I mean, he was one of the most honored actors in the country and did a lot of Broadway. And this was before he did Law and Order, when he did that for 4 years. So, I mean, he was there, and I talked to him and sent him the script the same day. He said he would do it, and we were in business. I needed to get started. I didn't have much prep. We had like 2 days prep and started shooting the movie. So that's the way I like to do it.
I really enjoyed the Maniac Cop 2 screening last night. I hadn't seen that in several years, and to see it on the big screen was a blast. I always heard that there was an early version of the script where the Leo Rossi character was actually supposed to be Joe Spinell's character from Maniac, and Joe Spinell was going to play him. So it was going to be the Maniac Cop and the Maniac teaming up. But that fell through, of course, when Spinell passed away. Is there any truth to that, or is that just a wild fanboy rumor that got started somewhere along the line?
Well, that's the first I heard of it. But I know that no, it's possible. Bill Lustig, who was my partner on the film, had directed Maniac, and he was very close to Joe Spinell, and I would imagine he might have considered Joe Spinell for the part, and that would have been all right. I think I directed Joe Spinell in a brief sequence in another picture. Deadly Illusion. He was in the one where at the gun registry place where he takes a hostage. But that's the only time I met him. I didn't know he was ever considered. And I don't think anybody could have been much better than Leo Rossi. He did a hell of a good job. And I was happy about his performance. But I wrote him a great character.
You did at that. You did at that. You've written a lot of great characters, and we thank you for all of them. And I thank you both. Thank you for a great movie, and I thank you for giving us so many great movies. It's been a blast.
Here's to some more.
Here is to some more. Thank you very much. 20 years, so it works.
Were you there last night?
Yes, I was.
I said the president couldn't make it to the screening because he couldn't leave the bunker.
Yeah, I know, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, apparently the bunker was in Alabama, though. From what I read.
Yeah, it's a former coal mine or something they go down into.
He loves the coal.
Those coal miners are looking after him, boy. They'll probably be the only ones left alive after the Koreans get finished with us. No wonder he opened the coal miners.
Well, I think we're going to go.